The staff has 5 lines. The piano has 88 keys. Something has to give. The 5 lines cover a useful slice of the keyboard, but the moment a melody climbs above the top line or dips below the bottom one, the staff needs to grow. It does that with a remarkably simple trick: a tiny extra line, drawn only as wide as the note head that sits on it, appears exactly where the pitch requires it. That strip is called a ledger line. One ledger line above the treble staff gives you the note A. A second ledger above that gives you C. One ledger below gives you middle C. The ladder never stops. It just extends itself on demand. A ledger line is nothing more than a private segment of staff, summoned into existence for one note and no wider. The rules are identical to the 5 permanent lines. A note sits on the ledger line or in the space immediately above or below it, and each step moves one letter up or down the alphabet. The note A5 sits on the first ledger above the treble staff in exactly the same way that the note A4 sits in the second space of the main staff. The note C6 sits on the second ledger above, just as the note C5 sits in the third space of the staff. The geometry is the same. Only the position changes. Below the treble staff, 1 ledger line below is middle C, 2 ledger lines below is the note A3, and 3 ledger lines below is F3. The staff simply telescopes, line by line, as far as the music requires. Here is the thing you have already handled without realizing it: middle C is a ledger line. Every time you read a note on the grand staff in the last episode, the C sitting between treble and bass lived on its own short private line, 1 ledger below the treble clef and 1 ledger above the bass clef. The same physical piano key, written from 2 different directions, is the identical ledger line both times. You have been reading ledger lines all along. The only difference between middle C and the higher ledger notes is that middle C sits in a familiar, central place. The principle is the same. A short extra line, a note on it, one step of the ladder. This is why ledger lines never need a separate set of rules. They are not an exception to the staff. They are the staff, continued. Once you see them that way, every new ledger note above or below the staff is just another rung in the same ladder you already know how to climb. Reading ledger lines without panic comes down to one discipline: never count from the bottom line every time. Anchor on the nearest landmark and step from there. Above the treble staff, the top line is F5. One space above it is G5, on no ledger line at all. One ledger line above that, the note sits on the line, that is the note A5. The space above the first ledger is the note B5. A second ledger line above holds C6. 2 notes above any known position, never a long count from scratch. Below the treble staff, the bottom line is E4. One space below it is D4. One ledger line below that holds middle C. Each extra line you encounter, anchor on what you know and take 1 or 2 steps. That reflex, rather than counting, is what keeps ledger lines from becoming a barrier. Practice that habit now. Name G5 before counting all the way from E4. Name middle C before counting from the G line. The anchor and step method is how fluent readers handle ledger notes in real time, and the sooner it replaces counting, the more naturally you will read. When ledger lines accumulate beyond 3 or 4, 2 practical shortcuts appear in real music. The first is a clef change. If the melody descends so far that it would need 6 or 7 ledger lines below the treble staff, the composer simply switches to bass clef where those notes live comfortably on the main staff lines. The second shortcut is the marking written as 8VA, placed above the staff with a dotted line. It means play everything under that bracket 1 octave higher than written. So a melody that would need 3 ledger lines above the treble staff can instead be written on the main lines, with 8VA telling the performer to lift it an octave. Both devices are signals to the reader, not obstacles. Recognize them, apply the rule, and continue. No note on the piano is off the map now. The 5 permanent lines cover the heart of the keyboard. Ledger lines extend the ladder above and below as far as needed. Clef changes and the 8VA sign handle the extremes without drowning the page in lines. You can follow a melody wherever it goes, because every pitch has a written address. The staff, the clef, the ledger lines and those two shorthand signs are the complete toolkit for locating any note in space. Next, the other dimension of written music, not where a note sits, but how long it lasts. The shape of the note head, the stem, the open oval, the filled dot, each one is a precise statement about duration, and reading them is the second half of everything.